Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. My name is Sarah, and I am happy to be back with you and happy to have a returning guest on the podcast. Tess Gerritsen was first on the podcast way back on episode 44, if you want to check out that first interview. That was in December of 2017, so it's been a little over 2 years since we've had the opportunity to talk. At that time, we were talking about her newest book in the Rizzolian Isles series. This time we are talking about a standalone novel called The Shape of Night. It is a gothic psychological suspense thriller, kind of a combination of genres. There's a mystery in it as well. Let me give you the description of it. After an unspeakable tragedy in Boston, Ava Collette flees to a remote village in Maine where she rents an old house named Brody's Watch. In that isolated seaside mansion, Ava finally feels at peace until she glimpses the long-dead sea captain who still resides there. Rumor has it that Captain Jeremiah Brody has haunted the house for more than a century. One night, Ava confronts the apparition, who feels all too real and who welcomes her into his world and into his arms. Even as Ava questions her own sanity, she eagerly looks forward to the captain's ghostly visits. But she soon learns that the house she loves comes with a terrible secret, a secret that those in the village don't want to reveal. Every woman who has ever lived in Brody's Watch has also died there. Is the ghost of Captain Brody responsible, or is a flesh and blood killer at work? A killer who is even now circling closer to Ava. So like I said, you've got a couple of different genres going on here. You've got psychological thriller, you've got the element of a gothic novel, you've got a mystery, you've got Ava's past and what happened that has caused her to flee Boston. So much going on, and there's so much that I want to talk to you about, but I do not want to give too much away because it is a thriller and it is intense, and you need to read it for yourself to find out really what is going on. It has elements of paranormal romance, which you probably got from the description. It has so much going on, and I am going to let Tess talk more about the book because obviously she wrote it and knows more about it. But it's really good. It sucks you in right away. At least it sucked me in right away from the first page and beyond. I was like, I think maybe I know what's going on here. I don't know if I know what's going on here. Do I know what's going on here? And I just kept reading because I wanted to find out what was going to happen. What was real? What was not real? What were the secrets from Ava's past? What were the secrets of this town that she found herself drawn to, and the secrets of the house? So many secrets. So let's go ahead and turn now to the interview with Tess Gerritsen. Again, the name of the book is called The Shape of Night. Hi, Tess. Welcome to the podcast. Welcome back to the podcast, actually.
Yeah, nice to talk to you again.
It is very nice to talk to you. It's been 2.5 years since you were on the podcast last, and we are here to talk about your new novel, The Shape of Night. Before we get to that, though, if you could just share a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, I am a retired medical doctor and now full-time novelist. And Shape of Night is my 28th novel, so I've been at this for quite some time, and I live in Maine.
Yes, and this is a standalone novel. It's not part of you write the Rizzolian Isles series. So give us an overview of the story of The Shape of Night.
Yeah, so I have written 12 novels in the Rizzoli and Isle series, and every so often I get this idea that is completely out of the box, but I can't wait to write it. And this is where this one came out. It started off with the fact that I love Gothic novels. And when I was, a young 20-year-old, I was reading a lot of Gothic novels. And for those who are not familiar with the concept, it's usually about a young innocent woman and a brooding hero and a house with secrets. So it's that triad of things that need to go into a Gothic. But it seems like I hadn't read that many recently. It went out of fashion, and I've never lost my love for those. And the other thing that was interesting to me was the idea of haunted houses. My mother always believed in ghosts. I've never seen a ghost, but I'm still fascinated by the idea that they might exist. I've been looking for them all my life. And of course, one of my favorite television shows as a child was The Ghost and Mrs. Muir. And it's about a widow who moves into a house that's still haunted by the sea captain, and they fall in love. So it was that combination of ideas that made me write The Shape of Night. It's about a heroine who moves into a house that happens to be haunted by the sea captain. They fall in love, but then she finds out that every woman who's ever lived in this house has died in this house. And now she wonders, is this actually a good situation for me? Does the ghost really exist? Is it my imagination? And is my life under threat?
Yeah, there's a lot going on in this book because you do get the Gothic element, you get the sort of psychological thriller element, you get the is it haunted? Is it not haunted? Is she going a little bit crazy? Is she not going crazy?
Yeah. It's a question of do you trust the narrator or do you not? And there are many reasons why you may not want to trust her because number one, she's a very troubled woman. She's running away from something that happened in Boston, and to kind of soothe her nerves, she does turn to the bottle. And so how much of this is is fantasy that came out of alcohol, and how much of it is guilt over what she's done, and how much of it is truly a ghost?
Right, and it's not just the house that hides secrets. It feels like as you get deeper into the novel, the whole town that seems to hide secrets. Like there's more going on here than really meets the eye at first. It's not just this sweet little touristy kind of town. There's other stuff happening under the surface.
Yeah, and I live in a small town in Maine, so I'm really interested in the fact that people you see every day, people people you think are perfectly nice, sometimes have some horrifying secrets, and in little towns can be just as dangerous as big cities sometimes.
Yeah, and sometimes even more so because everyone knows what everyone else is doing.
Right.
And they're more than happy to talk about it. You've spoken a little bit about Ava, the main character, and whether or not we can trust her as a narrator. What about her, though, do you think will resonate with readers?
Well, I think that all of us have a point in our lives where we want to run away. We want to leave all our troubles behind and find a safe haven. And I think we can identify with that. We can also identify with the fact that most of us, well, I don't know if most of us have, but many of us have done something we're ashamed of. And shame is a really powerful negative emotion that we don't talk about. It's never really written about. And when you find out what it is that Ava is ashamed of, you can understand why she ran away from the big city and tried to hide and tried to forget what she's done. So there are a couple of things that I think many of us would identify with. And finally, the third thing is that she loves to cook. So I think that a lot of us are going to feel, oh, yeah, I enjoy being in the kitchen, too, and stirring pots of risotto. And there's one other thing that I think we will all identify with is that we're always in search of the perfect lover. Who is the perfect lover? Is it possible that the perfect lover is not even real? That we can conjure up in our own minds or our own fantasies a man who may not exist but really would satisfy everything we need. So all those things put together, I think, are all elements of either fantasy or real life that many women will identify with.
Okay, so there you go. There's your first introduction to Tess's new book, The Shape of Night. We're going to go ahead and take our first break of the podcast, but when we come back, we'll be talking a little bit more about this relationship that Ava has with Captain Brody. Is it real? Is it not? Who knows? Stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with author Tess Gerritsen about her new psychological thriller, The Shape of Night. And I mean, talk about, many women fall in love with men who are unattainable. I mean, geez, Ava, way to take that to the next extreme. He may or may not exist. He might be dead. We don't know.
But it's there's also this parallel. I was fascinated by this information that was coming out of Japan about how people there are not getting married. Young men are falling in love with digital lovers on the internet. Because the perfect lover can, if they're not human, they can be everything you want. So they're having computer sex, and maybe this is a parallel. If you, as a woman, could find somebody who could totally satisfy all your sexual needs, and can't give you an STD, can't give you pregnant, doesn't need to be, cook breakfast every morning, who would you choose? The perfect fantasy lover who can satisfy you, or the real human, the flawed human, who is going to come with his own issues? So, it's something that we're seeing played out, but in the digital era.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he comes and goes, so she doesn't have to live with him. She doesn't have to put up with, his not putting the toilet seat down or whatever it is that you have to deal with in everyday relationships. So I did mention that this is a variety kind of genres. What appeals to you about writing novels that combine or kind of cross over genres like this one does?
I like the surprises. You get to a detective novel and a couple things are going to happen, at least to make them publishable. You know that a crime will be committed, that there will be a sleuth, whether it's professional or amateur, and the crime will be solved at the end. And it tends to be, nothing out of the realm of reality. But I love books that kind of skirt the edges. You're not sure whether they're science fiction or they're real life. You don't know whether they're fantasy or real. And I also love books that at the end leave it up to the reader to decide, what did I just read? Is it possible that I am misinterpreting what the author wanted, or maybe the author wants me to take my own messages away from that? So I love books in which a lot is left up to the reader.
And did you do specific types of research for the book?
Yeah, ghost hunting. We have, I said I live in the state of Maine, and we're known to be kind of a haunted state where we have a lot of buildings that are said to be haunted. And as I said, I don't really believe in ghosts, but I'm fascinated by the tales. So I was interested in the so-called science of ghost hunting. What is it a ghost hunter does when they're called to investigate a house? What do they look for? What equipment do they have? And my son and I actually went and filmed a couple of haunted places here in the state of Maine just out of curiosity. So we have visited haunted places. We've talked to people who've experienced odd things, and so a lot of that research went into the story.
Yeah, that part is fascinating because there is a team that does come into the house to see if they can figure anything out, and I don't want to give stuff away, but I've always been kind of fascinated by the science. The shows that you watch on TV, I always feel like they're just trying to make you jump.
Right.
But there really is actual scientific thought behind what people do when they investigate the paranormal. So that part was really fascinating.
Yeah, well, I mean, I did hang out with a woman who does ghost hunting, and they use equipment that you can always question the science of these things. Do these monitors actually are they picking up anything in reality, or are they picking up random cell signals from a tower, things like that? But I think what I love is that you get into a dark house that has this reputation, and your alarm starts going off, this little electromagnetic frequency alarm thing. And even if you don't believe in it, you still have that chill up the back of your spine. You still think something weird is happening here, or what am I missing? And then you walk out into the sunshine. You think, well, that was a load of hooey. But I think we can all we all know that sense of, oh, there's something eerie here. I don't understand it, and it's freaking me out. But it may not be anything but my own imagination.
Right. It may just be the surroundings, and yeah. Are there any autobiographical elements in the book or the characters? Anything from your own experience that you brought in besides your fascination with ghosts, of course?
Yes. Well, a couple things. First, it's set in a town that's very much like mine, where I live in Maine, a small town that's mostly a tourist town. For a lot of people, know each other's secrets. But I think Mainers are an interesting crowd in that they don't tend to be intrusive. We honor each other's privacy, but we do know a lot about each other. And the other thing that I brought in that's autobiographical is the cooking part. My father had a restaurant. He was a professional cook, and so I grew up with fantastic meals. I grew up with an appreciation of the skills it takes to produce a wonderful meal from the kitchen. And Ava, her profession is cookbook writing, so she's very much into food, and a lot of what she experiences are things that she thinks as she's in the kitchen preparing this dish or that dish. And I often think that cooking is a really sensual experience. You're using so many of your senses from the you listen to the sound of a knife chopping carrots on the board, and then you smell the things that come up from the steaming pots, and its taste and flavor, and so many things go into making a wonderful meal. So we're watching Ava as she's testing recipes, as she's experiencing her own crises as she stands at the stove.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about what it's like writing a standalone novel as opposed to writing a series? What are the things that you like? What are the things that are more challenging? Those types of things.
Well, the things I like are I get to have a little vacation for my characters. After 12 books with Jane Rizzoli and Maura Isle, sometimes I want them to just go and take a vacation so that I can try something new and different. So I love that, and I love the fact that I can spread my wings and just focus on a completely different topic or a different style of writing. I did that with my book Playing with Fire, which was about the Italian Holocaust. So that was a historical novel. It was very different, and it brought in a number of emotions that I don't usually explore. And this book was different in that I got to, I guess, revert back to the lush language of what I remember from my Gothic novels. To be able to take your time and describe what a house feels like, what it's like to step into this building that has such power over you, and also to explore maybe some of the sexuality that I've never really written about before. Now, I used to write romance novels, But I never really talked much about sex. It's really funny how everybody thinks that romance is about sex, but it really isn't.
Right.
This book is really talked about because Ava and his ghost are engaged in this relationship that is very erotic and is somehow speaking to her particular needs at that time in her life. I had to explore sex, not just sex with a ghost, but just sometimes even disturbing sex. So that was really new and different. The downside is that I have no idea what my readers are going to think about whenever I do a standalone. I know that a lot of readers are very upset when you try and veer off the path, and they want your old characters back, and they want nothing but Jane and Maura, Jane and Maura. But writers, we just need to write what we feel like writing.
Mm-hmm. And how has the reaction been so far? Are people liking it? Or are they, clamoring for more Jane and Maura?
It's been mixed. Some people go. I've heard some people go, "Wow, I really love this book. It's so different. It's so lush. It's so sexy and sensual." And then there are the mystery readers who really cannot deal with sex on the page. It's just very disturbing to them. It's funny how this splits down the line. I mean, romance. It seems to me that romance readers, and I, because I used to write in the genre, I know them pretty well. They're much more open. They're willing to accept a wide range of fiction with an open mind. Mystery readers, there are certain things they don't want to hear. They don't want to talk about, and one of them is what goes on, in the bedroom. So I think that mystery readers were a little bit taken aback by the sensual nature of the story. And finally, I think there are people that want their books, their solutions cut and dry. They want me to tell them exactly what happened. So it bothers them that I'm leaving it up to you to decide if the ghost is real or not. And there are enough clues that you could go either way, and it's really up to you how you interpret the story.
Let's go ahead and take another break, and when we come back, we'll be talking about what Tess is working on now. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. I am speaking today with author Tess Gerritsen about her new standalone novel, The Shape of Night. Can you talk a little bit about what you are working on now?
Yeah, I am working on the 13th Jane and Maura story, with a little bit of a twist. I've always loved Jane's mother, the character named Angela, who... we all have a lot of us have fraught relationships with our mothers. I'm so sorry my mother passed away. I didn't really get to continue that fraught relationship. But I thought, wouldn't it be interesting if Angela, who's a very bright woman, actually thinks she's witnessed a crime and nobody believes her. And she starts to do her own little investigation with her daughter saying, "Stop it, Mom, stop it, you're embarrassing me." And what happens if Angela is correct and her homicide detective daughter is the one who's wrong? So that's the idea. It's called Mrs. Rizzoli, and it looks at a crime from her mother's point of view.
Oh, I love that. Because she's definitely gone through in the last book, she went through some major transitions. So I mean, am excited to kind of see things from her perspective a little bit more.
Yeah, and also from the perspective of what is it like to look around your neighborhood, and you've been in this neighborhood for 30 years. You think you know everybody, but somebody new moves in, and you're not quite sure about them.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And what have you been reading?
I just read a lovely book by Paula Daly, Daly. She's a British author, and the title is "It's Clear My Name." A wonderful book about the heroine works for the Innocence Project in UK, and she's trying to decide whether this one woman who was convicted of murder is actually innocent. I love British books. I think they take their time. They develop character. There's not a lot of gore and police procedural stuff necessarily, but they're much more deeply psychological. And I should mention the other project that I'm just finishing up. My son and I have finished filming our movie called Magnificent Beast, and it is. I was trying to solve the mystery that has flummoxed me for a long time, and that is, why is pork forbidden food among certain religions? What led to that decision that pork should not be eaten? So we actually filmed around the world talking to religious scholars and archaeologists about the origins of the pork taboo.
Fascinating. Yeah, I remember you talking about that last time. So that sounds like a really interesting experience, and just getting to travel all over. And how is working with your son and kind of, he's an adult now, not a child. So
yes.
how is that working?
Fantastic. He's an excellent editor. And I mean, the whole thing is now, what we call it's picture lock. We're just waiting for our composer to finish composing the score, and came up with some really interesting answers and some really fascinating experts, and listen to opinions that I think pretty much answer the question.
Okay. And where will people be able to see that when it comes out?
Well, we'll be submitting to film festivals this year,
okay.
So hopefully people will be able to see it next year.
Cool. That's very exciting. I know you have a website, so if you can tell people what your website is and where they can follow you on social media.
Right. My website is tessgerritsen.com, and I am on Twitter at Tess Gerritsen. And you can also find me on Facebook, too.
All right. Thank you for that. So we've talked about the book, we've talked about writing, we've talked about several things, but is there anything that we have not covered that you would like to bring up now in terms of books or writing or anything at all?
I think I just this is more my plea to the readership, and that writers we're not one trick ponies. We like to explore creatively, whether it's in genre or out of genre, or not even in the world of books, but in the world of television or movies. That try to keep an open mind, and if a writer writes a standalone book, very often that book means more to that writer than the general series novels that he's going to be writing. So, and I find that's true for a lot of authors I talk to. It's the standalone books that are the books of their hearts.
Right. So, it might not be your cup of tea, but just be patient and wait for the next one in the series.
Right.
You don't have to like everything that an author writes.
That's right.
Do you ever feel a little bit of pressure when you go into writing a standalone novel, or is it really more just for you and for exploring that creative aspect of a different kind of genre?
I think that I think that going into a standalone is more of an act of joy. Sometimes writing in the series that everybody expects you to write and everybody wants you to write can start to feel like you're trapped in a box. I tell people I know now why Arthur Conan Doyle tried to kill off Sherlock Holmes. He was tired of him. I'm pretty sure that most people who write long-standing series occasionally feel like I want to get out of this. I want to do something different. And not everybody is able to sell that book, and that's. it's part of having a very, very long career, I suppose. If you've been writing 28 books, you're going to want to do something different.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I would imagine so. Just for your own maybe sanity, or just for your own, stretching your brain. I know that's not a thing, but just kind of stretching your creativity.
It is, or just wanting to explore a new topic. I mean, one of the joys of writing, and whether it's in series or not, is learning new things. I love to explore new topics. I've in the course of my career, I've studied the space program. I've looked at historical medicine and World War II, and now haunted houses, and try to do a little bit of everything wherever my interest took me. And that's what's made this such a wonderful career, is that I don't get stuck doing the same thing every time.
Right. That sounds wonderful. Well, Tess, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me. The book is, it's so many things, and I don't want to give too much away, but it's creepy, and it's fascinating, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
And once again, I want to say thank you to Tess for joining me for this episode of the podcast. Again, as I said at the beginning of the episode, if you want to hear the first interview with her, that is episode 44, way back in December of 2017. So you should definitely check that out as well. Thank you so much, though, to Tess for coming back to the podcast to talk about The Shape of Night. This book is creepy and sensual and confusing, and it's really good. I mean, it's got so many different elements going on, and it keeps you guessing, and it keeps you engaged and intrigued, and I just plowed right through it. I didn't want to put it down. So you should definitely check out The Shape of Night by Tess Gerritsen. Thank you, as always, for joining me. Please join me again on Tuesday when I will be speaking with author Kim Taylor Blakemore about her new novel. It's historical fiction. It is called The Companion. It takes place in 1855 in New Hampshire. So join me on Tuesday. As always, if you are a fan of the podcast, please do follow us on social media, share our posts, like our posts, do all those wonderful things that help us out so much, especially subscribing to the podcast and giving us either a written or a 5-star review would be wonderful. Thank you so much, as always, for joining me. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I hope that weekend involves plenty of time to get yourself lost in a good book. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.